Hello everyone and welcome to Classic Gamer 74. I am your host Anthony Ventrello, and today is episode 18, Mail Order Only Atari 2600 Games. This episode was suggested by one of our loyal viewers, Randal Fox. Many of the best Atari games were never available in store. As a matter of fact, some of the more valuable ones were actually only available through mail order. Examples of these games were discussed in episodes 13 and 14. Although some of them were not the greatest games, many of them that were extremely valuable were also mail order games such as Chase the Chuckwagon, Tooth Protector by Johnson & Johnson, Birthday Mania, Gauntlet, and Red Sea Crossing. All these rare and valuable games were not available in retail stores, but were only available through mail order and were advertised in newspapers and magazines. In today's episode, I'm going to discuss more games that were only available through mail order, yet not as valuable as the ones on the previous episodes, but ones that are rare and somewhat valuable nonetheless. The first example is KoolAid Man, that was manufactured by M Network under the umbrella of Mattel. And here's a copy of the advertisement that was made for the KoolAid Man game. In order to get the game, you had to save up 125 points, or 30 points plus $10. The game was available in both Atari 2600 and in television. To give some of you that weren't around back in those days about how popular the KoolAid Man himself was, I personally know several people who saved up points for this video game that did not own an Intellivision or an Atari 2600. They just love the KoolAid Man, and they hope that maybe someday they would be able to talk their parents into getting them an Atari in order to be able to play this game. Okay, and here is the game itself. Alright, according to the instructions, the story behind the game is help KoolAid Man in a battle with the Thirsties. Those insatiable Thirsties are stealing the water out of your swimming pool. You want to catch them when they stop to dip their straws in the pool. Also, help KoolAid Man gobble up Kool-Aid ingredients in order to keep the Thirsties from bouncing KoolAid Man around the backyard. This game is a lot of fun. I mean, I spent many hours playing this game, as did many of my friends. I honestly have to say that I did not have a friend that had an Atari 2600 that did not have this game. That game was so popular. Matter of fact, it actually scored an 81% rating with most game magazines. Much later, Mattel did release the game to retail stores, but not after children around the world drank gallons and gallons of Kool-Aid in order to get it. Atari Age was the magazine that was available to members of the Atari Club. In order to join the Atari Club, all you had to do was fill out this form and pay your annual due of $1. The magazine itself had lots of cool advertisements, stories, puzzles, and other information about upcoming games, contests, and events. Also, there were video games that only Atari Club members had access to. Here's the advertisement for one of those games that was called Atari Video Cube, which was very similar to the Rubik's Cube, which was a craze back in those days. The game was available for $26.95, but only for members of the Atari Club. This game plays just like the Rubik's Cube of old days, in which you are trying to get a specific color on each side of the cube. You can move the cube around and find the colors and try to put them back on each specific side. And of course, it's hard to do sometimes because you have to maneuver the cube around, just like the real one, in order to get each color on each side. The game's a lot of fun, just like the Rubik's Cube was back in the day. Because the game wasn't as popular as they predicted it would be, a couple years later, Atari actually paid for the licensing to use the Rubik's Cube name. The game is pretty much identical to Atari Video Cube. The only main difference is some of the colors, and that's pretty much basically it. It's the same game, although this game was a little bit more available as opposed to the other game, which was only available through the mail order. This one was also a mail order game, but was later released in very limited quantities to retailers. Next up, we have Crazy Climber. Back in the 80s, another fad was climbing up the side of very tall buildings. A man in Chicago, dressed in a Spider-Man suit, actually tried to climb to the top of what was then called the Sears Tower. And some of these other crazy people inspired this game. The game was available to Atari Club members for the price of $26.95. Although the game was released much later to retail stores in limited quantities, it's highly sought after by collectors. Most don't even realize that this game was a port of an arcade game. Okay, the object of the game is to try to climb to the top of 4 skyscrapers. And of course, it wouldn't be a game unless there were things trying to stop you. You have the danger of the windows. People are always opening and closing them on your hands. You have a mad doctor who is throwing a lot of bizarre objects at you, like a flower pot, a basket of fruit, and a bucket of water. You have a condor that is trying to drop eggs on you, and I suspect other things. And you have steel girders that are going to possibly knock you down. And then, of course, you have an electrical sign that sometimes pops up now and again. Really fun game, although personally, I have just recently discovered it. I didn't have this game as a kid, nor did I actually know anyone who did own the game. If any of you own this game, or especially if you got it back in the day of the Atari Club, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Next up, we have Quadron. Quadron was also a game that was exclusive to Atari Club members, and it was available to them only for the low price of $31.95. Quadron. Alright, Quadron is considered one of the rarest of all the games made by Atari. It's really not known if this game was actually even available in stores later on, as some of the other exclusive games were. They believe only 10,000 copies of this game were made, and it was the first game, Atari game, to use voice synthesis. Alright, the object of the game is to help break these prisoners called runts out of this prison. They are held by these evil aliens called the captors, and you have a weapon called phaser balls that you use to destroy the captors and help to rescue the runts. It's a really cool puzzle game, definitely unique. I mean, later on there were some games that were kind of carbon copies of this, but this was the original and a whole lot of fun, but also can get very frustrating because it takes a while to get used to the controls. But once you do, it's a really fun game that I guarantee you will become addicted to, just like I did. Next up, we have Gravatar. Here's the advertisement from Atari Age magazine. This game was available to Atari Club members for the price of $31.95. Eventually, the game was released to retailers with its red label, making the silver-labeled club exclusive extremely valuable to collectors. In this game, the evil alien Gravatar is using gravity to keep a stranglehold on these different solar systems. Your job is to fight against the gravity and destroy his evil minions, thus making the galaxy safe for all. And our final game today is Sword Quest Waterworld. Sword Quest was a series of adventure games that were created by Atari. Fans played these games in hopes that one day they would win fabulous prizes. There were to be 4 games in this series: Earthworld, Fireworld, Waterworld, and the never released or even started Airworld. The third game, Waterworld, was exclusive to Atari Club members for the price of $31.95. Each one of these games came with a comic book that was to assist you in trying to figure out the quest and the secrets of the game. I will be running a separate episode on the Sword Quest series and on the prizes and the stories behind it. Okay, your goal in the Waterworld game cartridge is to discover the 7 numerical clues that will refer you to the appropriate page and frame number of the accompanying comic book. There you must look artfully for word clues to send to Atari on the enclosed Sword Quest Challenge entry form. Okay, the grand prize for this one was a $25,000 jeweled crown. This one probably, out of all the Sword Quest games, was my least favorite, Fire World being my absolute favorite, but yet, nonetheless, it was still challenging and was fun. Well, that brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see on future episodes or some games you'd like to see us review, drop us a line in the comment section below, and someday your idea may turn into an episode. Don't forget to visit our friends at AtariAge.com and AtariProtos.com for all your Atari needs. This has been Anthony Ventrilo saying goodbye, and we will see you all next time. Have a blessed day.